Welcome back to Friday Live, episode 25. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. We're back, and it's frigid in New York, so we are just trying to keep warm and stay alive. So hopefully you're doing the same. So after a brief holiday, we're back to host today's show, and we have had a few things come up this week. Next week, we're going to fly off to Switzerland for SIHH on Friday evening. So we're actually going to host a special SIHH show on Thursday at 1 p.m. To talk about what's coming up.
We're going to call it Friday Live on Thursday.
Yes, it's a thing. We'll make it happen. So we'll talk about all the things coming up at SIHH.
We sure
I'm
will.
excited for SIHH. Jack's excited for SIHH.
Super excited.
New watches.
Yep.
Love them. It'll be great. We'll be reporting back to all of you
See old
while
friends,
we're there.
make new friends, see new watches.
Again, try to stay alive.
Yeah.
So it'll be, a whole thing. So a couple things that happened this week.
To be fair, we're going to be inside most of the time.
Yeah, that's true.
So.
It's not going to be, no, I mean like maybe emotionally and physically, because there's just so much to see.
Yeah, that's true.
That it's kind of tough.
Yeah.
But yeah, this week on the site, we had a few things come up. I mean, Jack did a stellar review of the Sky Dweller yesterday.
Thank you.
Hard to let that one go, I think.
Yes, it was actually, I sent it back with regret. I will say.
Yeah.
I will say. But better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. That's what I say.
Amen to that.
Right.
So we also have HSNY. They announced they have a scholarship, or they have had a recent anonymous donation to the Henry B. Freed Scholarship.
This is the Horological Society of New York,
Yes, thank you.
America's oldest horological institution.
Yeah, and so it's for American watchmaking. We posted about it on the site. If you're interested in applying for it, definitely check it out. Also, Peter Speak Marin is speaking next Tuesday if you're in New York, so definitely check that out. That's also on the site.
Yep.
So, a couple other things. Jack was in London before the holidays. Tell us a little bit about your travels.
Yes, in London for a couple of days, and I had a couple of days free actually. So I thought I would do something that I should have done, I think probably many, many years ago. And I actually went and looked at the watch and clock collections at the British Museum, and the Worshipful Company of Clockmakers, which is a London-based watchmakers guild, which has been around since the 1600s. It's actually one of the older. I think it's the oldest still extant watchmakers guild in the world, and one of the oldest still extant guilds in the city of London. They have been building a collection of watches and clocks for centuries, and as you can imagine, it's pretty strong on English clocks and watches.
Yeah.
But there's a tremendous amount of interesting other stuff there. They have a phenomenal collection of brigades. I mean, something like 20 brigades all sitting in one place. They've got a special exhibition area devoted to Dr. George Daniels, which is incredible. But both, I think, are really kind of must-sees for anyone who's traveling to London and is interested in clocks and watches. You're just going to see stuff that you really can't see anyplace else. And I think those two collections together outside the Patek Philippe Museum, or possibly the Watch and Clock Museum in Neuchâtel, it's some of the most impressive stuff that I've seen anywhere. Yeah. Really gives you a sense for the depth of history behind these little gadgets that we love so much.
Yeah, I haven't been there, so next time I go to London, I'll definitely put it on my list.
Plus, London, Christmas time, it's kind of magical, dare I say?
Very festive.
Yeah, it's very festive.
And a lot warmer than it is here. Yeah. So, what else did you do over the holidays, Jack?
I read a couple of really interesting books, one of which I'm almost embarrassed to say in public that I have not gotten around to reading until 2017, 2018. They're
now,
both
keep in
books.
mind, I also have not read either of these books, so I am currently embarrassed. Yeah. Continue.
So one of them is a really wonderful book. It's a sort of a general history of Switzerland, and it has the somewhat provocative title, Why Switzerland? Why Switzerland?
Why Switzerland, Jack?
And I'll just read to you very, very quickly from the introduction because I think it's hysterical, if you don't mind watching me. So the introduction reads, why Switzerland is really two questions, not one. The first is the understandable question which any English-speaking reader who picks up a book about Switzerland must ask. Why should I read about Switzerland when there are so many other things to read about? I thought that was rather droll. So the cool thing about this book, and the reason that I'm recommending it, is because there are a lot of reasons why the modern watch landscape looks the way it does and why so much watchmaking takes place in Switzerland in the way that it takes place. There's a lot of things very characteristically, specifically Swiss about the Swiss watch industry, and getting a larger context for why Switzerland, which is in many respects kind of a much more interesting country than you might think at first, getting a larger perspective on why Switzerland is the way it is and kind of how it came to be. It's just really helpful in understanding some of the idiosyncrasies of the watch industry. And perhaps more directly, related to, well, definitely more directly related to watch and clock making. This is something which I think anyone who has any interest in watches and clocks on any level should make sure is in their library. It is David S. Landy's Revolution in Time. The first edition of this book came out in the early 1980s, I believe, and the end of the book was sort of a farewell song to a mechanical horology. The most recent edition came out in 2000. This is the most recent edition, and it sort of catches us up to the developments of the 90s that saw the release of the Swatch, the next steps in the evolution of the quartz crisis, but also the return of watchmaking as a luxury play from the Swiss watch industry. And the book goes all the way through the history of watch and clock making in Europe from the 1300s, late 1200s, all the way up to the year 2000. And if you are curious, again, as to why so much watchmaking happens almost exclusively in Switzerland, what the historical forces were that led to that, and why the Swiss watch industry acts the way it acts, does the things that it does, and is structured the way that it's structured, this book is absolutely indispensable. The author sadly passed away, I believe, in 2008, but he was a Harvard economics professor, so it's as in-depth and kind of dense as you would imagine, but he also has a great sense of humor. And finding humor in watches and clocks is both harder and easier than you might think. But he does a really, really fantastic job of making this an engaging and a very human story of the evolution of timekeeping on just about every level. So highly recommended. David S. Landy's Revolution in Time and Jonathan Steinberg's Why Switzerland?
Did you get these on Amazon, or where did you find these books?
Revolution in Time, the most current edition, is available through Harvard University Press, through their website. And Why Switzerland was, I think it was Amazon.
Okay, great. And maybe
Generally
at the
available.
end of the show, we'll leave a comment on the titles and everything, so everyone can check those out. On the holidays, what watch did you wear the most? Because before we left, I guess between Christmas and New Year's, we posted one of our most popular articles, I would say, is the watch I wore most during the year. And mine was the White Gold Day, which I can confess is the watch that I did actually wear the most over the holidays. It's festive, good metal, precious. It's good. What did you wear over the holidays?
I actually wore what is perhaps a diametrically opposed watch to that. It's a Seiko Turtle in stainless steel. It was kind of heavy weather, and I took a lot of long walks and spent a lot of time outside, and it just seemed like a great, sort of everyday / outdoorsy, kind of watch to wear. The other watch that I wore most frequently was on my right wrist, which was an Apple Watch Series 3, which we're going to talk about a little bit more.
More on that in a second. So, new year, fresh start, new goals.
Yeah.
What are your watch resolutions or watch goals? # watch goals.
So my single biggest watch goal for this year is one that I've had pretty much every year since meeting Jason Heaton. Jason, if you're watching.
Yes, and we had him on the show
we did.
a few months back.
Ever since meeting Jason, I've always wanted to be one of those guys who could actually take a dive watch diving. And getting a dive card is not a terribly complicated thing to do, but I have managed to not do it every year for probably the last 10 years. Or, like I said, for as long as I've known Jason. Once again, my resolution this year is to get my diver certification and go diving with a dive watch with Jason Heaton, ideally.
I think that'd be fantastic. Do you think we should do a Friday Live episode?
An underwater Friday Live episode?
An underwater Friday Live episode.
Oh, yeah, that'd be hysterical. Me and Jason.
I think it'd be fantastic.
Sitting next to each other.
I mean, they have waterproof cameras, right?
They do.
Okay.
They do. With a little
Do they
coral
have
reef
internet
in
in the
front
water, though?
And it would sound something like this. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Friday.
You should talk that way for the rest of the episode.
Maybe not.
For me, my watch goals for the year are to mix things up a little bit. I tend to skew a little Rolex heavy. God bless, love them. Great watch, great everyday wear. But I do want to kind of explore getting a watch that's maybe a little different, different maker, different complication. And
today you're wearing.
Today I'm wearing a Rolex. I'm wearing my Daytona. So yes, not off to a great start. Not off to a great start. But it's only the second week of January.
New Year's resolution.
Or no, it's the first week of January.
This particular New Year's resolution has lasted about as long as New Year's resolutions typically last.
Yes. I've been on a vegetarian cleanse all week, and I ordered pizza last night, so, it's fine.
And turkey bacon this morning, if I remember correctly.
Yes, but we don't need to get into that now.
No, definitely not. Moving with discreet haste to the next
Moving to
topic.
discreet haste. So the watch you're wearing today is the watch that you wore most over the holiday?
Yeah, actually both watches,
Yes.
the Seiko and the Series 3.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the topic that we are going to be talking about today, which is smartwatches. Last year, we covered the Apple Watch Series 3 in great detail. Ben was there for the launch. We did a really awesome video. Just in case you forgot, we're going to do a quick clip of that video, so stay tuned.
So we're here in downtown Brooklyn on the water, and we see such an amazing cross-section of people, we thought we would actually stop a few and ask them what they think of the new Apple Watch. We have here the Apple Watch Series 3. Is this something that you would ever consider buying?
Yep, probably going to go and buy one on Friday.
Okay. So then would you give up your Tissot?
It depends on probably the occasion, but I go to the gym a lot, so I'd wear it and use it in the gym, a lot of physical activity and stuff. I think there's worth for both, definitely, yeah. Yeah, I like my sort of the archaic look of this one anyway, so I wouldn't ever fully go digital, I don't think.
So have you ever owned an Apple Watch?
I have not, no.
Would you ever own an Apple Watch?
I don't know that I would, just because, I mean, your phone is already so accessible, it's there, you know, so I don't know if an Apple Watch would really be that much more efficient.
Okay, so did you know that the new Apple Watch, in fact, can disconnect from your phone and you can make phone calls on it and text messages, so you don't even need your phone. You can leave your phone at home. My phone, just so you know, is in our office 3 miles away.
Okay.
So we're actually making a phone call on the watch right now. Will, is your phone ringing?
Is it working? Can you answer it? Oh, you
Yeah,
can
you can
hear
hear
him.
him.
What's up, Will? Good. Just checking out this new iWatch. Is that what
Apple
it's called?
Watch, yeah.
Apple Watch.
And I've got a few questions for you. You wear an Apple Watch.
Yes.
Why?
This is really helpful. I wear this every day. I had a lot of other watches, and after I got this, I stopped wearing any of them.
And have you seen the new Apple Watch, the Series 3? Do
Yes, I have heard about it.
you want to see it right now?
Yeah, sure. Oh, this is the Apple Watch?
This is the brand new one. So this is the only ceramic Apple Watch 3 in the world right now.
The only one?
The only one. So I don't have my phone with me. My phone's in my office, and I can use this like a phone and text and do everything.
Oh yeah, this has LTE in there.
Exactly.
Oh, that's nice.
So you have no desire to upgrade or anything like that?
I don't know after seeing this.
So, smartwatches. How do they fit in the landscape of mechanical watches? I personally do not wear one. I did for a couple weeks. I kind of got tired of it telling me to stand up when I was working my desk. The little like bump. It was a great innovation, truly, and I get why people have them and wear them. But just for me, it became
tiresome.
Yes,
Yeah.
it just didn't.
Where would you characterize? Where would you put yourself on the sort of serious technophile at one end of the spectrum and serious technophobe at the other end of the
I'm
spectrum?
kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
I like my phone. I want to get the new one.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of I'm not waiting in line outside the Apple store like
Right.
Steven did
Right.
or ordered it. Did he do that? I can't remember. Anyway, so for me, it's kind of I guess I'm not so obsessive to where I always have to have the coolest
newest, latest
technological
and
gadget.
greatest,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's just
yeah.
not my thing. But you wear yours every day on your
I
right
do.
wrist. So maybe
and-
walk us through your journey
Okay.
of smartwatches.
I mean, I would actually. I mean, I'm a technophile, I guess.
Yes,
I would
okay.
characterize myself as not necessarily an early adopter, but I'm definitely interested in having something pretty close to the latest and greatest when it comes out. And the very first Apple Watch that I wore was the very first Apple Watch. And it was a really fascinating product, but I had kind of a similar experience you did. I wore it very, very consistently for months. And I wore it on the right wrist, and as different software updates for it rolled out, I found functionality increasing. But I found myself kind of finding it easier to not wear it more and more as months turned into years. But the Apple Watch Series 3, I've been wearing consistently on the right wrist with a mechanical watch on the left wrist, pretty much ever since getting it. I got it when it came out, the Series 3, and it's been a really, really interesting experience having two watches on, for one thing.
right.
Ben says something really interesting in his Apple Watch Series 3 review. He says it's a watch that to get the most out of it, you really have to commit to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what do you think is the most important thing that you've gotten out of the Apple Watch? Like, so what what is like a daily benefit for you for wearing it?
For me, one of I think unquestionably the biggest daily benefit is just a reminder to get up and start moving. You know, I mean, ours is a somewhat sedentary profession under the best of circumstances.
True.
And, you know, I don't mind being encouraged to get up and walk around, even though I work at a standing desk. I don't mind knowing that there are certain, you know, just basic goals in terms of, I mean, it's going to sound like I'm not setting the bar very high for my own level of physical activity, but you know, being reminded to sort of you know, maintain a certain basic daily energy expenditure level, I find you know, pretty useful. I use it less for notifications, although it's nice to know that they're there if I want them.
Right.
I don't do a tremendous amount of text messaging, and I don't, you know, I'm not bombarded with notifications on my phone under the best of circumstances.
Yeah.
But using it as a sort of you know, extra connectivity device and as a fitness tracker and a health support device is I think that's what I use it the most for.
Well, now they have a lot of healthcare companies are subsidizing Apple Watches.
Yeah.
Which is a really big thing with the Series 3. But for kind of I think there's like so you wear it on both wrists. I have a very hard time wearing something on my right wrist. I always have to wear.
Have you ever tried wearing a Fitbit and a conventional watch?
I have not. No.
Yeah. So
I don't like the way they look. Also, that's another thing. It's like an aesthetic thing for me, which I think is, you know, probably very shallow, but I am who I am.
Well, I wouldn't characterize it as shallow at all. I mean, you know, how we present ourselves to the world is something I think that, you know, a lot of us think about on a daily basis, and if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. But I think as far as mechanical watches are concerned, I mean, there's still a stronger, you probably have a stronger emotional attachment to your mechanical watch than you do on your Apple Watch or any smartwatch, because I think that also because they're disposable at the end of the day. I mean, there's a whole...
Well, this is something that I've given a lot of thought to. You know, the first of all, just wearing two watches of any kind feels a little bit strange, I think. And I've worn two mechanical watches occasionally just to, you know, see what it's like, just out of curiosity. I've never gone, you know, the late Nicholas G. Hayek, the founder of Swatch Group, he was famous for stacking 5 or 6 Swatch Group brand watches, you know, six watches on one wrist, 6 watches on the other, and he'd roll up his shirt sleeves and, you know, pull up the cuffs of his suit so that you could see them, and you know, it was part of his larger-than-life persona. Yeah, you know, it's Mr. Swatch, they called him.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've certainly never gone that far.
Right.
But having a second thing on your right wrist when you're used to wearing just a wristwatch on your left wrist, it takes some getting used to. You know, we get very, very accustomed to certain basic aspects of our physical environment, and you know, it's like moving a deer's salt lick. You know, they just get really, really uncomfortable. But you can get past that. You know, I mean, one of the things that readers often you know, say to us when we review bigger watches is, "Oh, you always say after a while it starts to feel kind of comfortable." But the truth is, you know, if you're used to wearing a smaller watch out of preference and you put on a larger watch, for the first couple of days it's going to feel awkward, weird. But you do tend to acclimate to, you know, to certain things physically.
Yes.
So getting getting over the 2-watch thing was one thing, and then when I started to you know, do it habitually, when I started to wear both the Apple Watch, the Series 3, and a mechanical watch on my left wrist, one of the things that I started to realize was I was getting something different out of each object.
Right.
So, you know, the Apple Watch Series 3 it's pretty much a fully mature smartwatch, at least in my opinion at this point. And I know not everybody feels that way, but it feels like a really mature product to me. The user interface has gotten really, really easy to use. Certainly much easier than the first iteration of the software in Series 1. But it does different things for me than a mechanical watch does. You know, I look down at my Series 3 Apple Watch and I see this amazing piece of technology that allows me to really, you know, custom curate the amount of information that I interact with on a daily basis and on a minute-to-minute basis. But the Seiko and you know, and my other mechanical watches, you know, my Grand Seiko, my Speedmaster, you know, these are things that I have a very different kind of connection with. So with the Apple Watch Series 3, I feel like I'm appreciating and connected to and attached to the quality of the technology and the information experience that it creates for me, but it's completely different than the kind of emotional, you know, tug that you get from wearing a mechanical watch.
Yeah, I feel like you could kind of argue that the smartwatch is a utility product more so now than, I mean, watches originally were created as utility products, but now technically no one needs a watch. No one needs to buy a watch. Like, you have your phone. Right. You don't need everyone knows the time, so you don't it's become an object of kind of I don't want to say accessory, but like it kind of is. But
Well, I mean, I think we can say the A word. Yeah, it's
an accessory, but it's something that's so much more emotional now. So it's kind of become more of an object of joy or something. Does that make sense? Where it's like the watch is now, the Apple Watch or the Smartwatch is now a utility product, and your mechanical watch is something that, I mean, for me, my watch brings me joy. When I wear it, I look at it and it makes me smile. And so that's kind of I think there are two different things there.
I ran across rediscovered a really wonderful essay by the science fiction writer William Gibson, which he wrote for Wired magazine in, it was like the late 90s or maybe 2000 it came out. And it's called the Tamagotchi gesture. Do you remember what Tamagotchis are?
Duh, I had one.
Yeah.
I killed it and died. I was not very responsible, but it's fine.
So you take better care of your watches, right?
Yeah.
So Tamagotchis, for those of you who don't remember what they are, these were little electronic pets, basically, that you kept in your pocket, and you had to remember to feed them, and you had to interact with them. But the whole idea was to have this little thing that's alive, that's kind of attached to your person. And Gibson's, it's a really interesting article to read if you can dig it up online. It's still archived. But he talks about how, to him, mechanical watches became irresistible because they were kind of like Tamagotchis. It felt like it was completely irrational, but you have this thing with little, parts that actually move, and you feel like it's somehow alive and attached to you. And that's something that you don't get from any electronic product, I think. And it's something I've always thought is true about, all other things being equal. Like quartz watches always, or at least when I first got interested in watches, quartz watches were less interesting to me because they were battery powered. It felt like they were dying the minute the minute I started to wear it. And I don't necessarily feel that way anymore about all quartz watches, but I think the point remains. There's something about a purely mechanical timepiece that connects to us almost kinesthetically or almost physiologically.
Definitely.
Anyway, so they're very different. They're very different experiences, and I don't think that for people who love mechanical watches, smartwatches represent a real threat because they're not. They're appealing to different. Yeah, they're appealing to different impulses.
Yeah, they're a different thing, and I think the only kind of category that has suffered is the mechanical watches or the quartz watches. Are in the same price point.
Right.
And I think that's kind of where and those, interestingly enough, those brands have started making smartwatches. So you have like the Michael Kors Fossil watches, and like I've seen such a big push with those, especially through like fashion influencers on Instagram, and like there's been a whole push towards getting the Michael Kors smartwatch.
Right.
And then other brands have kind of come out with little smart clasps and all that other.
Yeah, there's a lot of experimentation going on right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think two really important points you've made is number one, while smartwatches and while the Apple Watch is not having much of an effect on the luxury watch market, and you don't have to go very high to start seeing a diminished effect of smartwatches either.
Right.
I mean, somebody who wants to buy a $500 or $600 Seiko Prospex is not going to be deterred probably by the presence of the Apple Watch as a similar option at a similar price point.
Yes.
But for sort of the casual watch owner who's looking at spending $300-400, it's harder and harder to spend that on just a standard sort of quartz fashion watch instead of at least exploring smartwatches. And of course, lest we forget, the Apple Watch is I think by far the dominant player in the industry. But there have been some interesting efforts by other companies, including Tag Heuer and Montblanc.
Yes, and I think those are both. Did we? Oh, we were going to show them all. Yeah. But that's okay. Do we? They have, Montblanc came out with the smartwatch last year, I believe.
Yep.
And then, so that's a really interesting one. And then the Tag also.
Right.
But I think the clasp is the ultimate kind of fix-all, really. If they can develop a clasp that has like a screen, so you can kind of, because it still could take your pulse. And so I think refining that would be a great way to combine the two. But then again, it's like, you have a luxury watch, do you really want to put a different clasp on it? Like part of the craftsmanship is a deployant clasp or a pin buckle.
I mean,
Remember that conversation? I do.
I've also found that I think one of the problems with smart straps, and again, we can get used to a lot more things than we think we can get used to, but one of the problems with smart straps is they really change the kinesthetics of wearing a watch. They really change the physical experience. It just feels like a much more bulky object. So, but who knows what the future will bring.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a place for mechanical or smartwatches in the mechanical watch
Yeah.
industry. I just think it's like it's a different thing. It's kind of like there's quartz, there's smart, and there's mechanical. But should we see what we asked you guys yesterday what you thought about it, and so we have some comments from all of you. And there was one really interesting one that kind of referenced pocket watches, which I thought was cool. I just have to find it on this page. Where did you see that one? I mean, what did you think about that with the pocket watch reference?
Oh, that basically the idea that
Smartphones will eventually go the way
Right.
of pocket watches.
Oh, so the question was the comment was smartphones will eventually go the way of pocket watches. Being able to glance at the wrist for information is more practical than pulling the phone out of the pocket. And then the question, if the future of connectedness is the smartwatch, how do they coexist with mechanical watches? And I think that that's something that, this was basically the subject of this, the centerpiece of this entire episode was really looking at ways in which they can coexist. And I think they certainly can. And I think they will for the foreseeable future. And again, it's because they're really very different, they're very different products. I mean, to me, smartwatches have sort of expanded the vocabulary of what we can wear on our wrists, but they are certainly, I don't think they're going to replace mechanical watches anytime soon.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But it seems like a lot of you do wear smartwatches as well as your mechanical watch, so you're not alone, Jack.
Right.
Actually, maybe you've started a trend. Maybe you're the trendsetter.
Maybe. Yeah, it's interesting. Several people also asked questions about smart straps. And that seems to be something we're seeing maybe a little bit, it's something that some brands are still experimenting with. But I think the basic problem with smart straps is nobody's figured out how to keep it from feeling like a bit of a compromise.
Right.
If you have some degree of connectedness, if you have a connected device on your wrist, I think that there's a tendency to sort of want, the sort of full experience, of what you can get. And smart straps, they make wearing a mechanical watch a little bit less comfortable. It feels a little bit more unwieldy. And the payoff is not high enough for you to get attached to the extras that they deliver, at least so far,
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
But who knows? There's a lot of people looking at a lot of different approaches.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe we'll move on and see what questions,
Yeah, sure.
which if you've left questions, we will get to them. So let's see. Nicholas Schmidt asked, do you think smartwatches will help the average person wear a watch again?
I think the answer to that question is yes.
Yes. I think we've already seen it.
We have.
I think the Apple Watch completely brought a new interest in mechanical watches. I've always heard from people be like, oh yeah, I wore an Apple Watch and I didn't really love it, or I stopped wearing it, but I missed having something on my wrist, so I started looking for a mechanical watch. So I think it's a great thing for us all, really. I don't know if you've had the same experience.
I mean, I think you can call it sort of a, it's a kind of a gateway watch, isn't it?
Yes.
It's gotten a lot of people thinking about wearing a watch in general, who weren't necessarily thinking about wearing a watch before. It's a cool new gadget, so people who are into cool new gadgets, but who might have been dismissive of the idea of wearing a watch have suddenly, the Apple Watch has made it, and other smartwatches have made it, not only acceptable but interesting to think about wearing a watch. So I think there's, I don't think we've seen a plateau at all in the level of interest that there can be in wearing a mechanical watch. And I think that there are probably quite a few people out there, I'm hoping, that there's quite a few people out there who are mechanical watch lovers waiting to discover that aspect of themselves, and I think that a smartwatch can be, people can kind of surprise themselves. They put one of these things on and they say to themselves, well, what else is out there?
Yeah, no, definitely. Next up, this is an interesting question. So John Acker, why do tech companies succeed in the smartwatch space while actual watch companies fail?
In the smartwatch space?
Yes.
I think the simplest answer to that is they're both worn on the wrist, but that's almost the only thing they have in common.
Right. Yes.
And the more successful smartwatches we've seen from traditional watch companies like Tag Heuer have been ones that have resulted from a recognition that this is not what we're good at,
right,
and finding people who are good at it.
Yeah.
So it takes. I mean, you look at what at the R&D time and money that Apple has put into developing the Apple Watch, to get it up to what the Series 3 is, which, like I said, I think is a really mature and successful product. I mean, it's an unbelievably expensive undertaking which has taxed the intellectual and development resources of some of the largest, most powerful, and most sophisticated tech companies on the planet. It's not something that you can it's not a space that you can decide to get into. And I think that if you're sitting around a table in a boardroom in a luxury watch company or any watch company in Switzerland or wherever, and you're saying to yourselves, "Oh, maybe we should get into this space." You're kidding yourselves.
Yeah.
It's like a fish saying, let's get into hunting gazelles on the African savannah. It's a
Or
completely
asking
different
you to
world.
write about handbags.
I could take that on.
I know, me too. Anyways.
But it's like they're just radically different products.
Yeah.
And to do it right, to be competitive, it's like, okay, you're gonna compete with Apple?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Frederick Plum, do you think that we will see people who stop wearing mechanical watches instead of smartwatches? Instead of smartwatches, instead of a smartwatch, and then collect pocket watches to feed their passion? So do you think we will see people who stop wearing mechanical watches?
Start wearing a smartwatch and then start collecting pocket watches.
Yes.
Well, I certainly think that there's a lot to be said for the idea of collecting pocket watches in its own right. Lest we forget, for most of the 500 or so year history of mechanical watches, a watch meant pocket watch.
Right.
Wrist watches didn't start to become popular, as many of you know, until after the First World War. And it was really the end of the Second World War that saw an explosion in the ubiquity of wristwatches, and sort of the diminishment of the pocket watch is something that a person would wear on a daily basis. But there's so much out there, just about every interesting complication, with the exception of the mechanical chronograph, was first implemented in a pocket watch. There are literally millions of beautiful American, so-called railroad-grade pocket watches out there going for a few $100 on eBay any day of the week. I mean, if you really just want to collect out of love of the mechanics and out of a love of history, pocket watches are, I think, really they're the way to go.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see a rising tide of enthusiasm for pocket watch collecting over the next few years. Not necessarily because of the smartwatch, but I don't think it's going to hurt.
Yeah, no, definitely. Fun fact, the first perpetual calendar by Patek was a ladies' pendant watch movement.
That's right.
And they took that and put that in,
Yep.
I think it was a wristwatch.
And a wristwatch
So it's the
case.
first perpetual calendar wristwatch, because
Right.
they used to have pocket watch. But anyways, fun fact. One more, I think. Let's see. I think, here, this is a good one. Watchiasm. What can a mechanical watch company do to help the new generation get mechanical watches over smartwatches?
What can mechanical watch companies do to encourage a new generation to adopt a mechanical watch
Yes.
instead of a smartwatch?
Yes.
I think that's not going to be the problem for
Right.
most people. In other words, I don't think it's an either-or question necessarily. Now, this is from a guy who's perfectly comfortable wearing two watches at once.
Right.
But there were quite a few people who wrote into us and said, hey, on the weekends or, for fitness, I'll wear, a Garmin or a Fitbit or, Apple Watch Series 3. When I'm going into the office, I'll wear one of my good mechanical watches. So there are lots of ways that people figure out how to sort of fit different things into their lives. And, it is true what Ben said in the Apple Watch Series 3 review about, getting the most out of it if you kind of commit to it. But at the same time, there are plenty of people out there with more than one mechanical watch, including most Hodinkee viewers. And certainly nobody feels a need to wear only one watch all the time.
Right.
So I think the big question that has been booted around ever since the first smartwatches came out, was is this in mechanical watch enthusiast circles how much of a threat is this to mechanical watches? And I think it's a false dichotomy ultimately. I think that what we're seeing, what we're learning as the months and the years go by, and as the mechanical watch industry continues to do its thing and the smartwatch industry continues to do its thing, I think what we're seeing is it isn't really a threat. Yes, it is a threat at a certain price point to a certain kind of watch. But with a good mechanical watch starting at depending on who you're looking at, anywhere between $250 to $500, and and going up sharply from there, and with mechanical watches and smartwatches, really scratching different itches. I mean, they just appeal to different parts of your brain, I think.
Yeah.
I think the whole question is probably going to sort of go away over the next year or two.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think on that note, we'll wrap up the episode. Thank you again for tuning in, and again, we're going to have our special Friday Live on Thursday.
Yes.
For SIHH next week. So be sure to tune in, and we'll send out a teaser for that just to remind you.
Yep.
So
the news cycle's going to get pretty hectic in about a week.
yeah, it will be crazy.
And we'll see you then.
Yeah, see you then. Bye. Have a good weekend.